Fleetwood Mac had rumors. They had the drama, the heartbreak, and the perfect storm of talent and timing that turned them into legends. But they were not the only band with that kind of greatness inside them. These are 10 bands who deserved everything and got far too little. Let's begin. 10. Chilliwack. Chilliwack were one of the finest rock bands Canada ever produced. A group whose melodic sophistication and vocal harmonic ability placed them in a category that most of their American contemporaries could not approach. Formed in Vancouver in 1969 from the ashes of a psychedelic group called the Collectors, they spent the following decade releasing album after album of beautifully crafted rock music that connected deeply with Canadian audiences while remaining almost entirely invisible to the rest of the world. Bill Henderson's songwriting was sharp and emotionally intelligent, and the band's ability to blend hard rock energy with soft rock accessibility gave them a versatility that should have translated to international success. My Girl in the summer of 1981 became their biggest hit, reaching the top 40 in the United States and suggesting that a breakthrough was finally arriving. It was not. The music industry's indifference to Canadian acts, outside of a handful of approved names, kept Chilliwack permanently below the ceiling their talent deserved to shatter. They were a great band with great songs in the wrong place at the wrong time, which remains one of the saddest sentences you can write about any artist in music history. 9. Wet Willie.
Just keep on smiling. You say you're about to go insane.
Wet Willie emerged from Mobile, Alabama in the early 1970s with a sound that nobody else was making, a genuinely intoxicating hybrid of southern rock, soul, and rhythm and blues that placed them in a category entirely their own. While Lynyrd Skynyrd and the Allman Brothers received the critical attention and the arena bookings, Wet Willie were quietly producing music of equal quality and considerably more stylistic range. Jimmy Hall's voice was extraordinary, a raw and soulful instrument capable of moving between gospel intensity and rock swagger, with an ease that most vocalists spend entire careers trying to develop. Keep On Smilin', released in 1974, reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and remains one of the most joyful and most underplayed records of the entire decade. The band had everything required for mainstream success: the songs, the performances, the live reputation, and the voice. What they lacked was the full commitment of a major label willing to invest in breaking them to a national audience. Wet Willie deserved to be playing stadiums every summer. Instead, they became a footnote in a chapter of music history that should have had their name printed directly on the cover. 8. Stories.
Louis was wider than wide.
Stories was a New York band whose brief commercial moment in 1973 suggested the beginning of something extraordinary and turned out to be the entirety of it. Brother Louie, their biggest hit, reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1973 and introduced a band of genuine sophistication and real emotional range to an audience that seemed ready to follow them anywhere. The song was a bold and progressive piece of work for its time, addressing an interracial relationship with a directness that most pop music of the era carefully avoided. Michael Brown, who had previously co-founded The Left Bank, brought an orchestral sensibility and a melodic intelligence to the group that set them apart from their contemporaries in ways that critics noted but audiences never fully rewarded. Internal tensions and lineup instability prevented Stories from capitalizing on their commercial momentum, and they dissolved before a second major hit could cement their position in the decade's story. Brother Louie remains one of the most interesting and most overlooked number ones of the decade, a song that pointed toward a future the band never got the time or the stability to inhabit. 7. Stars. Stars arrived in 1975 with a hard rock sound so precisely calibrated and so technically accomplished that their failure to break through to the commercial mainstream remains one of the more genuinely baffling outcomes of the decade. Formed in New York from the remnants of several earlier groups, they possessed a musical tightness and a collective energy that placed them alongside the finest hard rock acts of the era. Brendan Chown's bass work and Richie Rano's guitar playing gave the band a rhythmic foundation that could hold its own against any of their more celebrated contemporaries. Coliseum Rock, their 1978 album, was a hard rock statement of such confidence and such quality that it should have launched them into the arena circuit permanently. Instead, it marked the beginning of their commercial decline, arriving at precisely the moment when the music industry was beginning to shift its attention toward the emerging sounds of new wave and punk. Stars were a band who built something genuinely great and poured everything they had into it, then watched the world move on before they had the chance to fully show what they were capable of achieving. The timing was merciless, and the music was magnificent. 6. Sutherland Brothers and Quiver. The Sutherland Brothers and Quiver occupy a unique and heartbreaking position in the story of 1970s rock music. Ian and Gavin Sutherland were Scottish songwriters of remarkable ability, and the band they formed with the members of Quiver produced a body of work that deserved far greater recognition than it ever received. Arms of Mary, released in 1976, was one of the most perfectly constructed songs of the entire decade, a melodic and emotional masterpiece that reached number 5 in the United Kingdom, but barely registered in the United States. The song demonstrated everything the band did best: warm harmonies, intelligent lyrics, and a musical sophistication that sat comfortably alongside the finest work of their era. Rod Stewart recorded their song Sailing and turned it into a global number 1, which brought the Sutherlands significant songwriting royalties, but did almost nothing to raise the profile of their own recordings or introduce their name to a wider audience. There is a particular kind of frustration reserved for songwriters talented enough to give other artists their greatest moments while their own equally deserving work goes almost entirely unheard. The Sutherland Brothers and Quiver lived inside that frustration for most of their career. If this list is making you angry on behalf of bands who deserved so much more, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. These stories need to be told, and we are just getting started. Let's keep going. 5. Crawler. Crawlers were born from the wreckage of Bad Company's predecessor Act Free and carried enough musical DNA from that extraordinary lineage to suggest that greatness was not just possible, but inevitable. Formed in 1976 around guitarist Jeff Whitehorn and vocalist Terry Wilson Slessor, the band produced 2 albums of blues-inflected hard rock that showcased a level of instrumental sophistication and emotional depth that their commercial profile never remotely reflected. Stone Cold Sober, their most celebrated track, demonstrated a band operating at the very highest level of their genre, built on a guitar performance of extraordinary control and a vocal delivery that recalled the finest moments of Paul Rodgers without ever feeling derivative or secondhand. The band existed at a moment when the music industry was in the middle of a generational shift, with punk and new wave aggressively claiming the critical conversation and leaving very little oxygen for bands operating in the classic rock tradition. Crawler were the right band at the wrong moment, producing music that would have been celebrated a few years earlier and would be quietly rediscovered and genuinely appreciated decades later. The years in between were simply too quiet for music this honest and this powerful. 4. Ace. Ace built their entire commercial reputation on a single song, and then watched as the industry's inability to look beyond that song condemned them to a legacy far smaller than their talent warranted. How Long, released in 1974, was a sophisticated and deeply melodic piece of rock music built around Paul Carrick's warm keyboard work and an understated vocal performance of considerable charm and genuine emotional intelligence. It reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and introduced a band whose musical sophistication and compositional ability suggested a long and productive career ahead of them. That career never materialized in the way the song promised. Follow-up singles failed to connect with the same audience, and the band dissolved in 1977 before they had delivered the body of work their debut suggested was clearly within their reach. Paul Carrack went on to considerable success as a session musician and later as a member of Squeeze and Mike and the Mechanics, which confirmed what How Long had always indicated about his extraordinary individual talent. But Ace as a collective entity deserved more than one celebrated moment in the spotlight. How Long was never meant to be a ceiling. It should have been a foundation for everything that followed. 3. Bad Company. Bad Company was not forgotten in the conventional sense. They were enormously successful, filled arenas, and produced some of the finest hard rock recordings of the 1970s. But their commercial success has consistently obscured the full extent of their artistic achievement, reducing them in the popular memory to a handful of radio staples when the reality of their catalog is considerably richer and more varied than that reputation suggests. Paul Rodgers possessed arguably the greatest rock voice of his generation, an instrument of such natural power and such emotional range that even his most casual performances carried a weight that other vocalists spent entire careers reaching for. Feel Like Makin' Love, Bad Company, and Rock and Roll Fantasy were not simply hit singles. They were definitive statements from a band operating at the absolute peak of their creative powers. Mick Ralph's guitar work was consistently and unfairly underrated, and Simon Kirke's drumming provided a rhythmic foundation of extraordinary solidity and feel that anchored even their most ambitious recordings. Bad Company should occupy the same conversation as Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones in any serious assessment of British rock music. That they consistently do not is one of the great critical oversights of their entire era. 2. Poco.
This crazy love of mine wraps around my heart.
Poco's story is one of the most frustrating in American rock history. A band who arrived first, worked hardest, and received least in a genre they had effectively invented. Formed in 1968 from the remnants of Buffalo Springfield, they developed the country rock sound that would define the following decade before the Eagles had played their first show together. Richie Furay and Jim Messina were among the most gifted musicians of their generation, and the band they assembled around them possessed a harmonic sophistication and an instrumental precision that their more celebrated contemporaries openly acknowledged as a direct influence on their own development. The Eagles absorbed Poco's innovations, refined them for a larger audience, and achieved a commercial dominance that Poco could only watch from a respectful and slightly heartbroken distance. Timothy B. Schmidt, who replaced Randy Meisner in Poco, later replaced Randy Meisner in the Eagles, which felt like the universe making an almost too obvious point about the relationship between the two bands. Poco kept recording and touring with remarkable consistency for decades, producing beautiful music for an audience that always felt smaller than the music deserved. They invented the template and never got to fully own what they had built. 1. Badfinger.
No matter what you do, I will always.
Badfinger's story is not simply the story of a great band who deserved more success. It is the story of a great band destroyed by a combination of industry exploitation, catastrophic mismanagement, and personal tragedy so complete and so devastating that it is almost impossible to separate the music from the suffering that surrounded it. Signed to the Beatles' Apple Records in 1969, they arrived with a melodic gift that McCartney himself openly praised, writing songs of such quality and such emotional directness that their commercial success in the early 1970s seemed to promise a career of extraordinary longevity. Come and Get It, No Matter What, Day After Day, and Without You, which Harry Nilsson took to number 1, were recordings that demonstrated a band operating at the very highest level of pop songwriting. What followed was a nightmare of financial fraud, stolen royalties, and legal entanglements that left the band unable to record or tour, while their money disappeared into the hands of people who had never deserved it. Pete Ham took his own life in 1975 at the age of 27, and Tom Evans followed in 1983. Badfinger were not simply a band who should have been bigger than Fleetwood Mac. They were a band who, under different circumstances, possessed every quality needed to have been the biggest band in the world. They had the songs, the voices, and the talent to fill any arena on earth. What they lacked was the timing, the machinery, or the fortune that separates legends from footnotes in music history. These are 10 of the greatest almost stories ever told. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.